This success came with a price. South Korea was supposed to stay poor, vulnerable, and stuck in the shadow of war. Instead, it became one of the clearest examples of the South Korea economic miracle in modern history. But miracles aren't magic, and they're never free. The same system that helped drive jobs, exports, and technology also shaped prices, pressure, and political trade-offs that still matter now. That's why how South Korea became rich is not just a history lesson, but a live economic question. Most people hear the simple version. A poor country worked hard, built big companies, educated its people, and won. The real South Korea growth story is about risk, control, discipline, and reinvention under pressure. And once you see that, South Korea versus North Korea stops looking like just a border and starts looking like two systems under extreme conditions. By the end, you will understand how South Korea industrialization really happened, why Samsung and Hyundai mattered so much, and what Korean economic development says about power, markets, and national survival. More importantly, you will see why this story connects to jobs, inflation, technology, and political stability far beyond East Asia. Because this is not just about one country getting rich, it's about what governments, businesses, and workers are willing to trade to rise fast. Stay until the end, because the final question might flip how you think about economic success entirely. Chapter 1. From Ruins to Survival. South Korea did not start rich, stable, or even promising. After the Korean War, it was one of the poorest countries on earth. In 1960, GDP per capita was just $158 by one World Bank-cited estimate. An OECD source goes even further, saying South Korea's GDP per capita was lower than sub-Saharan Africa in 1960. That's what makes the South Korea economic miracle so hard to ignore. This matters because rich countries usually begin with some cushion. South Korea had almost none, few natural resources, deep war damage, and a dangerous border with the North. By comparison, research from UNUWIDR notes that South Korea and Ghana had roughly similar GDP per capita before the 1960s. Today, South Korea's GDP per capita is above $36,000, which shows how extreme the turnaround really was. Why should you care? Because this is a story about jobs, survival, and national power under pressure. Think of it like a family starting with debt, no savings, and a roof that leaks. Every choice matters more when one bad move can ruin everything. That pressure shaped Korean economic development from the ground up. It pushed the country to chase exports, factory jobs, and political stability at full speed. But when survival becomes the national obsession, the next question gets dangerous. Who gets the power to force that transformation? Chapter 2. The government's big economic bet. South Korea did not grow by drifting into success. It grew because the state made a hard, risky bet. After taking power in 1961, Park Chung-hee pushed the country towards export-led growth and national economic planning. Instead of asking, what can Korea afford now, the government asked, what can Korea sell to the world? That shift changed the entire South Korean economy. The first 5-year plans were not just paperwork. They were blueprints for factories, roads, power, credit, and exports. According to World Bank research, domestic savings rose from under 8% of GNP in 1965 to more than 17% on average from 1970 to 1975, helping fund faster industrial expansion. This is how a poor country starts creating jobs, stabilizing prices, and building the industrial base that later shapes global markets. Think of it like a coach forcing a weak team to train for international competition instead of local survival. That's the heart of how South Korea became rich. It stopped thinking village-sized and started planning world-sized. But this model came with a trade-off. The same state that accelerated Korean economic development also concentrated political power and narrowed dissent under authoritarian rule. So yes, the strategy helped launch the South Korean economic miracle, but it also raised a harder question. What happens when growth depends on a government that refuses to be challenged? Chapter 3. The Rise of the Chaebols. South Korea did not industrialize through small firms alone. It bet heavily on giant family-run conglomerates called chaebols. That meant names like Samsung, Hyundai, and LG were not just companies. They became the engines of South Korean industrialization and export power. In plain English, the government picked a few hitters and told them to swing big. The government helped them with cheap credit, selective tax and trade incentives, and protection from competition. OECD and IMF materials describe directed credit, selective trade policies, and barriers that favored large firms during key growth years. That mattered because these firms could build ships, cars, steel, and electronics at scale fast enough to create jobs and boost exports. Think of it like giving a few construction crews all the tools, money, and permits to build an entire city before rivals can even enter. That's a huge reason Samsung and Hyundai became symbols of the South Korean economic miracle. But here's the catch. This model created power as well as prosperity. When a few conglomerates dominate credit, industry, and exports, they can also dominate politics and weaken competition. Concentrated corporate power can shape wages, prices, innovation, and even market resilience. South Korea's growth story became stronger because of the chaebols, but also more dependent on them. And that dependence becomes risky when the same giants start becoming too big for the system to discipline. Chapter 4. Education, Discipline, and Workforce Power. South Korea didn't just build factories, it built people who could run them, improve them, and eventually outgrow them. That meant huge investment in schooling, technical skills, and a culture that treated advancement almost like a national duty. Why does that matter now? Because no country sustains growth if its workers stay cheap and unskilled forever. This is where South Korean economic development became a workforce story, not just a government story. By the 1980s and 1990s, South Korea had massively expanded schooling and literacy, helping move labor from low-value work into manufacturing and technology. OECD data later showed South Korea among the world's highest performers in educational attainment for younger generations. Think of it like upgrading a team from raw effort to real precision. That's one reason the South Korean economy could keep climbing instead of getting stuck in cheap labor. But there was a cost hiding inside the success. The same discipline that powered South Korea's growth story also fed extreme pressure, long study hours, and a brutally competitive culture. Every economic model has a human price, even when the GDP numbers look amazing. A workforce can become a national asset, but it can also become exhausted, anxious, and harder to sustain over time. And that creates a new tension. What happens when the system that made the country rich starts wearing down the people inside it? Chapter 5. From cheap manufacturing to global innovation. South Korea did not stay the world's bargain workshop. It kept moving up the ladder again and again. First came cheap manufacturing, then steel, ships and cars, and later chips, batteries, biotech, and entertainment. That's why the South Korea growth story is not just about getting rich fast, but about reinventing itself before competitors caught up. By 2024, the country's economy was about $1.88 trillion, placing it among the world's major advanced economies. The proof is everywhere once you look. In 2024, South Korea's semiconductor exports reached $141.9 billion, and in 2025, automobile exports hit a record $72 billion. Think of it like a country that started by sewing shirts and ended up building the nervous system of the global economy. That's the South Korea economic miracle in concrete form, and it affects markets, prices, and technology far beyond Seoul. But the real edge is not just production, it is adaptation, because South Korea's industrialization never froze in one era. The country also spends heavily on innovation, with R&D at 5.21% of GDP in the latest World Bank data, which helps explain why firms like Samsung keep competing at the frontier. This story is really about a national habit: upgrade fast or get left behind. But that same model now faces a harder test, because staying rich is often more difficult than becoming rich in the first place. South Korea's rise is not just history. It still shapes markets, technology, jobs, and global competition today. That's why the South Korea economy matters far beyond Asia. This story helps you read the world with more clarity, and it shows that growth is never just about money. The bigger lesson is simple. Countries can change fast, but success always comes with trade-offs. The South Korea economic miracle was built on planning, industry, education, and relentless pressure to adapt. That makes this story useful for understanding business, policy, and power right now, not just what happened in the past. So what mattered most, the government, the chaebols, or the workforce? Could another country repeat how South Korea became rich today? And is fast growth still worth it when the social cost gets higher? Subscribe, turn on notifications, and keep learning how geopolitics, economics, and power shape your everyday life, because the next shift may already be underway.